Okay, here's a thought. What if the best way to tackle climate change was also the best way to build peace? I know, it sounds a little counterintuitive, right? But it's actually the core idea behind a really powerful new framework, one that tries to turn one of our biggest crises into a solution for another. So let's dive in and break this whole thing down.
So on one side of the coin, you've got climate shocks. And we're not talking about some far-off threat anymore, right? We're talking about a relentless barrage of stuff, extreme weather, droughts, rising seas. This is our daily reality now, and it's putting a ton of stress on communities and ecosystems all over the world.
And then, on the other side, you've got violent conflict. You know the story. Instability, fights over resources, people being displaced from their homes. But here's the thing. For way too long, we've looked at these two massive crises as totally separate issues.
Yeah, this has been the standard playbook for decades. Climate action? That's over here, in its own universe, with its own experts, its own money. Peace building? That's way over there, in a totally different world. They're just operating in completely separate silos.
But what if that's the entire problem? I mean, really think about that for a second. What if the very act of separating these issues is the reason our solutions just aren't working? What if our failure to connect the dots is why we keep falling short?
And that brings us right to the heart of the matter. There's this massive, invisible wall running through our global institutions. We're calling it the wall of silos. And honestly, it's a strategy that's completely failing us.
You know, for years, we've thrown around this term, the climate security nexus. Everybody nods and agrees, oh yes, these things are linked. But here's the catch. Talking isn't the same as doing. The institutions that actually, plan the projects, fund them, and get them done. We're talking environmental agencies, development banks, diplomats. They're all still living in their own separate universes.
Okay, so what does this wall actually look like? Well, it's really made of three big reinforcing barriers. First, you have the institutional silos. This is where different agencies literally have separate rulebooks, budgets, and timelines that prevent them from working together. Then you've got the knowledge silos. The fancy term is epistemic. This is where the experts just don't talk to each other. Climate scientists are over here, conflict analysts are over there, they're not reading each other's work. And then, and this one is absolutely crucial, you have the financial silos. The big climate funds, they totally ignore conflict risk. And the peace funds, they don't even think about the climate.
And look, this isn't just some academic theory. This quote really hits home because it comes from people working on the ground. They are seeing this stuff every single day, how all these problems are tangled together, but the tools they're given are only designed to solve one tiny piece of the puzzle. So what do you get? You get these siloed solutions that just fall apart in the real world.
All right, so if the old way is so clearly broken, what's the alternative? Well, it's not a small tweak. It requires a total paradigm shift. We have to stop just talking about the link between climate and peace and start actively designing for it. And that brings us to the question that is really at the heart of this entire idea. How can we design climate adaptation so that every single major decision is also a peace decision? See the shift? It's not about just tacking on some conflict sensitivity checklist at the end of a climate project. No way. It's about redesigning the whole thing from the ground up, so its core purpose is to build climate resilience and social cohesion at the same time. The answer that's being proposed is something called the Climate Resilient Peace Initiative, or CRPI for short. And it's really important to get this. This isn't just another project. It's more like a whole new operating system for how we govern. It's a framework that's designed to completely rewire the rules, change the metrics for success, and shift where the money flows so we can tackle these connected crises together. So, how do we actually make this happen? Well, the framework is built on 5 very concrete pillars. Think of them as the blueprint for action. Let's walk through them.
Okay, this first pillar is a really fascinating bit of financial innovation. It's called peace bonds. Here's the basic idea. You take a big climate project, say a giant solar farm, and you embed proven peace-building activities, things like sharing the benefits with the local community or ensuring cooperation across a border. You embed those right into the project's legal and financial DNA. And because doing that makes the project less likely to run into social or political problems, it actually becomes a much safer, more attractive bet for investors.
And get this. This isn't just some feel-good idea. It has real, hard financial value. An analysis of a solar project on the Ghana-Burkina Faso border found that by building in these peace mechanisms, you could lower the borrowing costs by up to 200 basis points. That translates to millions, literally millions of dollars in savings, and that is the absolute game changer here. For the first time, you're making peace profitable.
Now you might be thinking, hang on, are we turning peace into a commodity for investors? And that's a fair critique. Some people are definitely worried about financializing peace. But the counterargument is really powerful. It says that by ignoring peace, we're already putting a price on it. When we choose not to account for conflict risk, that's a financial decision too, and it's one that ends up subsidizing dangerous projects and totally underfunding prevention.
The other 4 pillars really build out this new architecture. So Pillar 2 is polycentric governance. That's a fancy way of saying we need to move away from rigid top-down control and toward flexible networks where everyone, cities, local groups, national governments, work together. Pillar 3 is about rethinking early warning systems, turning them from just technical data into community-led tools that actually empower people to act before a crisis hits. Pillar 4 is huge. It's about recognizing indigenous stewardship as actual critical infrastructure. And finally, Pillar 5 is about creating youth climate councils, treating young people as the governors they are, not just a group to be helped.
And that 4th pillar? This statistic from the World Bank just drives it home. Indigenous peoples make up about 5% of the world's population. Just 5%. But they protect a huge, disproportionate share of our planet's biodiversity and healthy ecosystems. So recognizing their governance as infrastructure, well, that's not just about doing the right thing. It's literally one of the smartest, most effective climate and peace strategies we've got.
So, when you pull all this together, what's the path forward? At the end of the day, it's about shifting from accidental outcomes to intentional design. It's about consciously building a system where climate resilience and lasting peace aren't separate goals. They're 2 sides of the very same coin. And here's the really hopeful part. That big, high wall we talked about, the one separating climate and peace governance, it's already starting to crack. Look, change is always hard, but you can see it happening in these innovative projects and new ways of thinking. The process has already begun.
Which leaves us with one final, really powerful question. The path is there. We can see how to build a more integrated, a more effective, and frankly, a more just system. So the question is, are we going to walk through that opening deliberately by design, or are we going to wait until the next catastrophic climate-fueled crisis pushes us through it? Really, the choice is ours.